So now I will move from my this presentation of the French way to at the university and the Grande École, and I will show you some example at the Louvre Museum. But first, thermoluminescence. Some of you are not familiar with thermoluminescence, so I will go a little bit first a little bit in detail about that. And the first observation of thermoluminescence comes from this guy, Robert Boyle, from Ireland. And he was a chemist, physicist, philosopher, and he did, at this time, the scientists were doing a lot of different things. So this guy discovered first the emission coming from a piece of diamond, which it was loaned by him. So there is different story. One story is that he put his piece of diamond with him in the bed, and he realized when he was close to his body, the elevation of temperature led to a small luminescence. Then he moved to and what is he published? He moved to a flame of the candle, and he observed a luminescence coming out from this piece of diamond. So this is a book, you see, this is a book when he put, so this you can see the name here, Robert Boyle. And he described 12 observations presented in 1663 on luminescence from a piece of diamond, which are loaned to him to do this. So simultaneously, a little bit after, this guy also was working at the Royal Society in London, and he also tried to make some complement information about thermoluminescence and this effect. So the thermoluminescence is the process of thermally stimulating the emission of light from a substance following the absorption of external energy by that substance. So in general, there is external energy source used to induce phosphorescence, it was called phosphorescence, or immediate afterglow. And there is, after the preliminary study, the development start after the discovery of the radioactivity in the late 19th, early 20th century. So I will speak about delay fluorescence a little bit later. Two important persons for this. For the earliest observation of the optical stimulated luminescence, Becquerel, Edmond and Henri Becquerel. And they look at the infrared stimulated zinc sulfide and cadmium sulfide. And look at this spectrum also. Even, I think at the mid of the last century, you see they did some OSL, it's a phosphorescence with infrared stimulation of this material. So it looks quite new and quite important to do, but it's already known long time ago, I guess. By illumination with infrared light, we can observe some luminescence coming from this strontium sulfate. Important word, the word luminescence and thermoluminescence was first defined by this person, Wiedemann and Smith, more than 1 century ago. They tried to explain the dissociation, separation of charge, and recombination to produce luminescence. At this time, they tried to a little bit understand what's happened. What can have recombination after a long time? And they were already talking about separation of positive and negative charge. That means a storage of charge. And then came the word phosphorescence from Becquerel, radio photostimulation, photostimulated phosphorescence, etc. And finally, optical stimulated luminescence by Fowler in 1963. So this is a few historical of the thermoluminescence and optically stimulated luminescence. So if you look at the publication of thermoluminescence or thermoluminescence, you can clearly see that the first paper came out 1914, but 0 citation. The guy was unlucky. And then a lot of things appear. I put this schedule because the effect of irradiation of solid was very important, and thermoluminescence was used for irradiation dosimetry and archaeological datation. So very important period with a lot of publication on this field. And suddenly it's decreased because of the age, probably of the age of the scientist also, and because there is a renew in the 90s with the discovery of persistent luminescent material and new thing I will tell you a little bit more after. So let's illustrate the thermoluminescence with the well-known energy level diagram coming from the valence band and conduction band. So this is a classical recombination from valence band, excitation, and emission from the valence band. And when there is some traps, either electron traps or hole traps, instead of having the recombination, you can have the storage of the electron or the hole in this trap. In that case, there is no more recombination because one part of the electron or hole is trapped. And you can induce the recombination by a release of the traps. In general, it's through the conduction band. And if you have heating, so this is the thermoluminescence. This means you are heating. You can release the electron, for instance, for the trap. It's the same concerning the hole traps. And according to the trap depth, there is one thermoluminescence peak for this depth. And when the trap is a little bit deeper, for instance, in the case of the green traps, E2, there is a peak at the higher temperature. So you have a direct link between the temperature and the trap depth. And you have the same thing can occur with all traps. So this is the basic of thermoluminescence, historical and a short presentation of the energy level, what they are presented here. And if you look at the fundamental of persistent luminescence, for instance, you have this kind of schematic. And you see there is 3 kinds of traps. Deep traps, which are interesting for datation or dosimetry. There is what's so-called shallow traps and average traps in depth. And these ones are used for persistent luminescence. And this is mainly related to the afterglow, shallow traps. And this is a recombination, a classical recombination. So, of course, to measure this kind of phenomenon, you need a scientific apparatus. So what kind of apparatus? You need one sample. First, an excitation coming from X-ray or UV irradiation, for instance. Then you need to heat the sample. You heat the sample either by regular heating in a furnace, or you can have a release of traps by the lead or laser. So this can be in a CW, continuous wave, or a pulse or ramp mode. Then you have thermoluminescence or optically stimulated luminescence coming out. Then you have to use a detector, PMT, for instance, to measure the emission in the visible, and to use a filter in order to cut, for instance, one part of the light. So this is the classical way. So what does that look like? This looks like this, for instance, in the Louvre Museum. This is a OSL thermoluminescence reader. So it is a Rizzo DA20 automatic with excitation coming from gamma ray, for instance, or beta irradiation. Photomultiplier, so this is a detector. And you have the sample order and so on. So you put your sample inside and you can measure directly the light coming out after heating. In the lab, we have something to go at lower temperature. So this is a setup in the lab. We have excitation either with X-ray here, or we use directly UV radiation from this side. And this is the way to have low temperature and high temperature. Here in Kyoto University, the cryostat is not horizontal, but it's vertical, but it's the same, exactly the same principle. Of course, you need optical fiber, for instance, or the detector coming out from optical fiber, camera, and so on to detect the photon coming out during the heating. So simple, quite simple experimental setup, but behind this, I will not put a lot of science in this presentation, but there is a high-level science coming out from the traps recombination. So this is, for instance, what you can observe from the trap depth of E in electron volt, and there is a frequency factor S, and you have the thermoluminescence intensity coming out from this equation. So you have one trap, one center model, and you can have several central models when it's a several order model. So well-known Randall-Wilkins first order glow peak look like this. It's an asymmetrical peak. Well, you can see the shape here. And this is the expression a little bit more complicated, which can be solved in order to have to extract the parameter. So the parameters seem quite simple when you look at this kind of traps. You have the activation energy and the frequency factor and the number of trap electrons, for instance, or trap hole. This is a symmetrical way. In fact, when you look in detail, for the more realistic model, you have to look a little bit more, and you need to add different trapping probability, retrapping probability, and so on. So the model is a little bit more complicated. And in general, you have to test different models to know which is the best model. So if you look at the Adribos paper from Netherlands, you can see the guideline for the extraction of trapping parameter from the thermoluminescence glow curve. He explains that, of course, you need function of temperature, function of the dose, UV or X-ray dose, for instance. You have to control this. Function of the heating rate, very important, is to control and to move the heating rate in order to have the information about the mechanism. You can use a thermal cleaning. You stop at one point and you wait for a while until it's completely clean. And you have to apply different methods to double check. Inertial rise, etc., peak position. So this is the tool that is well known to extract the parameter from thermoluminescence.